Hello and welcome to the Tammy Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Listen, today is about Black History Month. It's our series, The Power of the Black African American Man. And wow, I have some amazing men coming on this whole month. And so I'm excited. I'm excited because I love that you are able to join me. I appreciate you being a part of Tammy on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Remember, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Listen, we've got so much going on. This whole year is the power of, and this month is the power of the Black African American man. Okay, we've got a guest that's going to come on. I mean, he's going to share some amazing things with us because he's a diasporic educator, an author, and a professor. But before we do that, I thought I would do a tribute to trailblazers in my family. I always say, remember, you've got to know your history so that you can motivate yourself and you can share it with others so that they can be inspired and motivated as well. And that's what we do here on Tammy. So I want to talk about the trailblazers in my family. I'm going to start first with my Aunt Cindy. Of you that are watching, I know that you know about my Aunt Cindy. So I wanted to share that about my Aunt Cindy. I hope you heard me okay when I was talking about my Aunt Cindy, the trailblazer in the McCottry family. So this is my Black history, okay? So another trailblazer, I'm going to talk about her, but we're going to talk about her a lot more in Women's History Month. Dr. Catherine M. McCottry. So that's MD, PhD. That's my mother. She's from Charlotte, North Carolina. She graduated from Barbara Scotia, and then she graduated from Johnson C. Smith University. She attended Howard University Medical School, and she was one of two females there at Howard University. When she moved to Charlotte, guess what? She was the first African-American female obstetrician gynecologist. Now, she was not the first African-American female doctor. We did find that out because in the 1800s, there was a doctor there who was the first. But we say she was the first in what we say the 20th century. All right, how about that? And she became first in so many things. And then she married my father, moved to Charleston, South Carolina. And of course, she was the first African-American female doctor and female OBGYN in Charleston. Delivered many babies. I tell you what, thousands of babies. And I'm still getting messages from folks that say, that was my doctor. That was my doctor. She brought me into the world. So I'm talking about my Black history. Now, not only was my mother a trailblazer as being the first as the female African-American female doctor, as well as physician, as well as the OBGYN, guess what? She also integrated all of the hospitals in Charleston, South Carolina. She was the first African-American doctor to do that. And so you're going to hear more about my mother. And of course, she's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Yes, and she was a member of many other organizations, and you're going to hear about her as well when we talk about Black History Month. I mean, about Women's History Month. I'm sorry. So we're talking about my history, my African American, my Black African American history. Most of you may not know, I am adopted from birth. So when I tell you I'm a blessed child, and now I'm a woman, but I still say child, I am a blessed child, and I know this. So now we're talking about the power of the Black African American man. And I have to finish with my father. Now, I didn't show you a picture of my mother. There's my mother. I'm sorry. I didn't show that picture of my mother. And now I'm going to talk about a Black African American man that made a difference in my life. He's called Dr. Turner M. McCottry, MD. All right. This is my father. And you know, I'm a daddy's girl because you see how I said it. My dad, my daddy. Bill, I see you laughing backstage. but I'm going to tell you a little bit about my father. My father's also from Charleston. I told you my mother was from Charlotte. Of course, they met, guess where? Johnson C. Smith University. What I didn't tell you was that this is a funny story. My father always said he saw a picture of my mother on the piano because my grandmother, Violet McKee, was there at the house, and she cooked food for, you know, when you're in college, you go to people's houses and have dinner. Anyway, he saw a picture on the piano and he said, that's going to be my wife. Okay. So guess what? That was his wife. That ended up being his wife. They met at Johnson C. Smith University. And my father then went on to Meharry Medical School in Nashville, Tennessee, and he became a medical doctor from Charleston, South Carolina. He was one of the first chief of staff at McClellan Banks Hospital, our only and first Black hospital in Charleston. He also was a founding member of the training nurses there for the Black nurses in Charleston. He was one of the founding members for that school. And then the last point I'm going to make in history is my mother and father, as they are right there, they are the first African-American medical team, as we know it, in the state of South Carolina. So when I tell you I'm blessed, I've been blessed. Listen, they got me unconditionally. And then I have my brother, Charles Turner McCottry, in case Charles is looking, my brother who's looking, and it's just the two of us. So Brother D, I want to thank you for sending all of these messages out to friends and all. But listen, that's what it's all about. It's about history. You've got to know your history. And so I know my family history. I know the McCottry history. We're from King Street, South Carolina, of course, plantation, all that stuff. But our diasporic educator is going to talk about all of that in a second. I just want to say thank you. Listen, if you don't know your history, sit down and talk to the oldest member in your family. Get that information now before it's too late. We've got to continue the oral histories, okay? So that we know where we came from and so we know where we're going to move to. All right, without further ado, I've been talking about this all week. Amazing men on Tammy. Yes, this amazing man, he was on Tammy a while ago, but I asked him to come back because he is a diasporic educator. He is an author. He's a Rutgers professor of Africana Studies. And so what better person to come on the show and talk to us during the beginning of our Black History Month series about the power of the African American man. Without further ado, come on out, Mr. Bill Davis.
Good evening, Tammy. How are you?
Fine. How are you, Bill?
I'm highly inspired after listening to that family history.
Well, I thought about it. I said, what was I going to do? Usually I do what's on your mind. You know that. And I said, instead of talking about COVID today, and we know what's going on with COVID, I said, let me start, since we're doing this Black History Month series, let me start with my history that I know of. And as I said, I'm adopted from birth. So they adopted me, and this is my history. This is what I grew up with. My Aunt Cindy, my mother, Catherine McCottry, and my father, Turner
Wow.
McCottry. Yes.
Wow.
So rich history, rich history. Before the
Absolutely.
Huxtables,
Very
there was
rich.
the McCottrys.
Very rich. Very
Yeah.
rich history. You are certainly blessed to have parents, adopted or not, who invested in you the way that they have, and then the results, the blossoming is absolutely incredible.
Yes, well,
Absolutely incredible.
I'm so
Congratulations.
grateful to them, and I did want to finish by saying as I'm telling people, thank you. I want to thank my parents, and even my birth mother, for for having me and for me being able to do this. Thank God that
Yeah.
I'm able to have that I was able to have the parents that I have to love me unconditionally. Because when you bring in people into your home, you have to have some type of unconditional love. And of course, you know all about that, single dad.
I've had some practice. I definitely have
Yeah.
had some practice. No
Yes, you
question
have.
about that.
Yes, you have. Well, listen, how are you doing, Mr. Bill, Dr. Bill?
I am doing very well. I'm
You
doing very
are.
well. And I'm happy to report that I'm happy. I mean, healthy. The crew is healthy. And so I think that when we think about COVID and all the other challenges, the pandemic of, racial violence, the insurrection that happened at the Capitol, all the different things that are happening in the world right now, if we're healthy and have the opportunity to participate in things that are going to be part of uplift, then that is a phenomenal moment and opportunity to be part of. So I'm grateful for all of those blessings that have come to me, our family, and to some degree, even our community. I mean, despite the fact that we've been disproportionately impacted by COVID, I do think that in some way, the things that impact you can make us stronger. So I'm hoping it's going to help us to coalesce, to see where we are, which steps we have to take so that we can actually move forward. And sadly, if you think about it in a larger context, had it not been for COVID, the previous occupant of the White House would still have been there. And so it was, I guess, the universe in a way deciding that it was time for a change. And there were 400,000 plus people that had to die as a consequence of it because of the incompetence and those kind of things. But um, in the larger picture, then the world is better because
That's
of the
right.
fact that we've had a change at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's right. That's right. A change. And as I tell people, and Bill, and we've had this conversation. It's not going to happen overnight.
No,
It's not the end
no,
all be all. It's not the
no,
fix all, but
no.
we can see that there may be some progression that's going
Right.
to come out of this. And so I'm grateful for that. Bill, as we are talking about Black history, first of all, you hear I keep saying the diasporic educator. So
Mhm.
tell me a little bit, because folks may not have seen you before with Baba's crew. Talk about who Bill is and what that means being a diasporic educator.
Yes. And so Tammy, when I came on the first time, I think I said to you, I was absolutely, really profoundly happy with the preparation. And so this time I did a little prep myself. And so for those people that weren't on the call the first time, I wrote a book, Baba and the Crew, True Story of a Single Black Father's Journey to Redemption. I've been a single father for 28 years. It's been an amazing journey. There have been, some huge challenges, but many blessings. I know that both of my daughters are on the viewing this right now, and so let me shout them out. Imani and Naima, I'm glad that you're on. I'm hoping that my sons, either Seiko and Tucson, I know some members of the village are on, and at least they informed me that they were going to be, so I'm trusting that that's the case. But I was born in Newark, raised in Plainfield. Both of my parents were, did not get an opportunity to, graduate from high school, but they emphasized education to all of us. And so I went to college. I went to Rutgers. I graduated from Rutgers, and fortunately, in the course of my career, worked at different colleges and universities, and so and now I have the opportunity to teach. And I value at an early age. My mother was very dark skinned. My mother passed away, as both my parents have passed away now, ancestors. And so my mother was very clear about the fact that we should be really conscious culturally. And so had me listening to Malcolm X at a very early age. So I was a nationalist very early. And I saw the rebellion that took place. So in the 1960s, when the rebellions happened in Newark, Watts, different places all across the country, there was one in the town that I was raised in that took place, which really helped to shape some of my political understanding of the world at the time. And so it was fortuitous in a sense that I ended up at a university, majored in Africana studies. And so I've been studying things about our ancestry and our history for a very long period of time. And really am grateful for the fact, because people asked me at that time, what am I going to do with a degree in Africana studies? And I wasn't really so much concentrated on what was going to happen after. I just felt that I needed, this is what was nourishing my spirit. And so I needed to nourish my spirit in order to get through, because Rutgers was a very hostile environment. And so there were very few. I graduated a class of 1,400. Out of that class of 1,400, only 36 African Americans and 2 Latins. And so it was a very hostile environment. It has improved since then. But that was what I needed in order to be able to move forward. And so I really just believe that all of us have some contribution that we can make to lift as we climb. That's part of my motto, to lift as we climb. I think that we should all think about not only how we can advance ourselves individually, but how can we move our community forward collectively. And as much as I love Malcolm, as much as I love King and different people who are part of our ancestry and part of the struggle that we've been on for a long time, as great as those brothers were, if it were not for the thousands of people who supported them, we would not know who they are. And so there have been people who have made contributions that may not have received that level of attention, but the people who they impacted know who they are. But on a larger scale, like I could name some people now. And so thinking about the conversation and prepping for today's show, anybody that knows me well know that I really look forward to having the privilege of doing a libation. And libation is a ceremony, for people that may not know, in which we pay tribute to our ancestors. And whenever I do libation, I always start with Imhotep. And some people may not have ever heard of Imhotep. Our ancestry dates back thousands of years. And so when we look at the accomplishments of our ancestors in ancient Egypt 5,000 years ago, we talk about Imhotep, we talk about Ramses, we talk about Akhenaten, Hatshepsut, Nefertari. I mean, we could go down the line of Egyptians and most people forget that Egypt is in the northeast corner of Africa, and that some people try to, question whether it was Africans actually built the pyramids. There were attempts to build pyramids in Ethiopia and the Sudan before they got built in Egypt. The Nile River is the only major river in the world that runs from south to north. And so Africans migrated from Kenya and Tanzania along the Nile up to Egypt. And then in Egypt, it was originally called Kemet, got renamed Egypt by the Europeans. And so our ancestors date back thousands of years. And so sometimes we forget how significant and the contributions that we made. So the Greeks were one of the Europeans that went to Egypt. In fact, when you go back and read some of the Greek writings, they say themselves that they learned how to do mathematics and science and all those things from the Egyptians. That's what the Greeks say. And that there were some of our ancestors that were actually rulers in Greece. And so it's important for us to understand the significance of our history. But whenever I do libation, that's how I started, because I want to help people to expand their understanding and definition of what African American history is and what does it mean to be part of the diaspora. Because to be part of diaspora, when the slave ships left Africa, went to Central, South, and North America, all throughout the Caribbean. And so that's how we became such a dispersed people, because of the fact that our ancestors were dispersed to various parts of the world during the time that we were in slavery. And if you think about 5,000 years of history, the chapter for slavery started in the 1400s. And so it's a small slice, but it's been an impactful slice. And it has shaped far too many people's opinions about who we are. The crazy thing about this is that because of the European domination in Africa, we have still not been able to overcome some of that domination now. Mm-hmm. And so other parts of the world, and some people may have justifiable concerns about some of the crazy stuff that may take place in China, but China is not under European domination. Sadly, there are parts of Africa that still are. And so when you look at some of the wars, some of the things that are taking place, it's all a function of the fact that, white supremacy has impacted far too many parts of Africa. And so our homeland is not in a space in which we can actually get the kind of support that we need in order for our struggle to be able to be advanced in the way that it should be advanced. And I want to say this so that people can understand it a little more clearly. One of the ancestors who was really was educated at Howard University and used his education in the States to go back to become the president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah had an idea, what was called the United States of Africa, that Africa should be united in language, currency, to limit the exploitation by Europeans. Had we been able to organize Africa in a way in which we had one common currency, one language, so that we could minimize the potential. Africa is the richest continent on the planet as far as mineral resources. But unfortunately, we're not always in control of that, nor do we have the ability to harness all of the resources that come from that. But Kwame Nkrumah the brother was phenomenal. The brother, I'm trying to think of my man, Patrice Lumumba, who was the president of the Congo. Congo is the richest part, one of the richest parts of it, and it's one of the largest countries in Africa. And so diamonds, gold, all those things come out of there. A lot of the stuff that we use in the cell phones all come from Africa. And so we have to figure out a way to help to strengthen our homeland so that they can help us. Our struggle has been international. One of my mentors said this all the time that the first Europeans stepped off a slave ship in Africa, our struggle became international.
Wow. Listen, this is a history lesson. I don't know if anybody's paying attention, but I'm sitting backstage. I'm like this. Kwame Nkrumah. Okay, I remember that. Impote. It's Impote, right? Is that what you said when you do the libation? Imhotep, when you do the libation. And I do remember that. Now, Bill, as you're talking, I'm thinking about when I go to Sullivan's Island here in South Carolina. There were the enslaved ships that came there. Many enslaved Africans died right there on that beach. Right. And there's a home there. So when I think about that, and we just lost one of our ancestors who used to do the libations. And so I do remember about libations. And I don't know if Queen Quet and all the folks that are listening right now, but I do remember that. So Bill, I really am just amazed. I mean, it's almost like I'm just gonna let you just talk, man. Just keep rolling. Because basically what we wanted this show to be was about education, and the education for our people to understand our history. Now, we're coming full circle because as Carter Woodson started in 1929 with the Negro History Week, which then led into Black History in 79 or something like that. 76, right. And so bringing all that together, try to tie that into where we are now and where we see things now, because we're going to take a break in a little bit and we're going to come back. But I kind of want you to kind of bring us from where you started and bring us to where we are now. And then we'll talk about where we're heading, because after all, I want to get to the Black man, because that's what all of this is about.
Absolutely. And so let's do just a quick critique of slavery. And the reason that I say that is because of the fact that slavery is what has allowed the United States to be the richest country in the world. And so for the hundreds of years that our ancestors worked for free, and we worked, and I guess you know this from being in South Carolina, that South Carolina was one of the deadliest states for people who were our ancestors that were enslaved. And I should say this first, that because far too often we should think about our language. So when Europeans went to Africa, they captured the best, brightest, strongest Africans that they could find, and then marched sometimes hundreds of miles from the interior of Africa to the slave forts. And some people call them slave castles. We need to call them dungeons, because that's really what they were. And we'd have to wait sometimes weeks to months in these slave dungeons before we'd actually get put on a slave ship. And then anywhere between 1 month to 5 to 6 months be on a slave ship. And we'd be shackled on the throat, the wrist, the waist, and the ankles. And we stayed, excuse me, on these slave ships. We ate there. We went to the bathroom there. People committed suicide there. We fought for food there. I mean, it was just absolutely crazy that we were able to survive this. And then get to some place in which we didn't know the language, didn't know the geography, didn't know any of those things, and then survive that. I mean, so I want us to be clear about what we've overcome. So when you think about your family history, you have an ancestor that survived being captured in Africa, that survived being on a slave ship, that survived several hundred years of slavery, survived 100 years of Jim Crow. And I mean, so for your parents to have actually had the opportunity to go to Meharry and become doctors, those kind of things, that is really phenomenal circumstance because it's rare that that took place. And then just one other thing I want to say about slavery, because sometimes we get confused about it, is that slavery does not happen in the South. And so slavery happened. I did a presentation about a year or two ago about slavery that took place in New Jersey. Slavery took place in New York. New York was one of the largest slave ports in the country, as was Philadelphia. Charleston was one of the largest slave ports in the country. And so, I mean, slave ports in the country. And so it's important to understand. And then connecting that to some current circumstance. And there's been conversation about the issue of reparations. And sadly, some of us are confused about this issue of reparations. And so we're the only group that has never been compensated for our contributions to the country, right? As tragic it is what happened to the indigenous people, commonly called Indians or Native Americans. I mean, when we get confused, because Columbus was going to India, which is why we call the indigenous people Indians, as opposed to Lakota and all the different names that they have. But we call them Indians because Columbus thought he was going to India. So we think about the indigenous people and the fact that they got run off of their land. So United States is built on stolen land and stolen labor. But we're the only group that's never been compensated for our contribution that has made the United States the richest country in the world. And so this issue of reparations, and I'm going to ask for those people who are watching, just to do a quick Google of the companies, not just the government, but the companies that were involved in the slave trade. And so if you look at the Brown brothers, which Brown University is named in their honor, Princeton University, Rutgers University, all the Ivy Leagues were connected to the slave trade. There's a book called Ebony and Ivy that lays out all the different Ivy League institutions that collected slavery. And so major banks, insurance companies, railroad companies were all involved in the slave trade. And so when we think about reparations, it shouldn't just be money that's coming from the government. It should also be money that comes from these major corporations. And so, and I want us to not think about it as individual checks, that when we think about current issue that we're facing now, so when people talk about COVID, they talk about the underlying conditions. When we think about our health circumstance and the underlying condition that we have is that that we have diets that don't necessarily help us to stay healthy. And so we have higher cases of diabetes. We have stroke, we have heart disease. And so I was talking to a friend of mine recently said that, anytime we're talking about issues that impact us, it should start from the financial and the income aspect, because we've been robbed for so long of our financial justice. And until we get the financial justice, it's going to be hard to improve the schools. It's going to be hard to do all the other things, the housing gap that we face, the income gap that we face, the wealth gap that we face, are all predicated on the fact that we have never been appropriately compensated and end up living in poor communities that don't have high functioning schools.
Wow. And when you talked about that, the first thing that I thought about that came to my mind was economics and health. It's always been about economics. This, as you said, this country was built on the slave trade. And I learned so much, of course, like you said, living in Charleston, being from Charleston, South Carolina, and having the opportunity to learn about what happened to our people. And I mean, I've always been that one to say, well, why did this happen? Why did we have to go through this? Sister soldiers, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Always been like that. Always been like that. But Bill, we're gonna take a quick quick break. We're going to come back, and now we're going to move forward because you brought so much to the table. I mean, what is it that we're going to do about reparations? But I want to talk about the history of our Black men, how our Black men have been emasculated, but yet still have come through all of those challenges. So we want to talk about that and get back to that. Listen, I love that outfit you got on too, my brother.
Well, I figured we're going to rock some of the African history, but you just got to come correct now.
I was trying to look like Queen Nefertiti. How about that?
You got the Queen thing working now. You know, I got the Queen thing working now. You know, but I had to come with my African garb now.
I got you. Listen, we'll be right back, Bill. We'll be right back.
Our roots are strong, our culture rich, our presence powerful. Our vibrant, colorful swag can be seen in everything we touch. Let's celebrate us and everything we are. The blueprint of food, music, and soul. For an immersive weekend of African American culture, dynamic musical acts, delicious food, cultural vendors, and more. Join us in Charleston for the Root of Soul J19 Fest. Low country roots, African heritage, Black soul.
Welcome back to Tammy. I just took a quick break, and I've got our professor here, I call it Dr. Bill Davis, but we know Bill Davis, a diasporic educator, author, and professor at Rutgers. So you finished with talking about reparations. You talked about how this world was basically built on the slave trade, how everybody got rich, and all of the companies. So my question to you is, what do you think as African American people that we need to do at this point when reparations come up? What do we need to do? Because people want to jump and say, well, we need this kind of money. We should have this. We should have that. What is your thought about that?
I'm an institutionalist, and I really do believe. And so, Tammy, I want to say this to you because I really admire the fact that I'm not sure how long your show has been on, but we need more platforms to be able to communicate to people and not have the constraints of whether a corporation or whoever the funding source is can determine the quality of the program or who are the people, your guests and all that kind of things, or the topics you choose to discuss. And so sadly, we don't control enough media. And so from an institutional perspective, we need to figure out how we can communicate with each other in a more significant and profound way. And so from an institutional vantage point, can we expand Tammy? And so, Tammy, I was thinking about you earlier. I was thinking about your show.
All right.
And I want to advance an idea. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to do it yet, but if not, let's do it next year.
All right.
Let's do African American History Month in Africa. Mm-hmm. Let's go to Egypt. We can actually see the pyramids. Yes. Let's go to Ghana or Senegal. We can actually go to the Door of No Return. And then just imagine how that would be for your viewers to know that we're in Egypt. We get a chance to see. I mean, when I went to Egypt, it was over 30 years ago when I went to Egypt. And I went with one of my mentors, phenomenal brother. This brother there were over 1 million stones that were carved in order to build these things. They're all weighed several tons. It's 100 stories high. It has tunnels and all kind of things in it. I mean, even the technology today would be a challenge to try to do it. This was done 5,000 years ago, which is why I always start in ancient Egypt. And then when you go to the Door of No Return, right? And then when you see all the different things that our ancestors go through, they had the dungeon to come through, all that kind of stuff. So just imagine how powerful that show would be if we went to Egypt, saw that, then went to West Africa and saw the slave ports. And so, we'll do a GoFundMe page, whatever we got to do so we can do it. African American History Month 2022.
We're there. We're there. We are there. I love it. I love it, Bill.
It'll be part of the reparations.
Yeah. Hello. Hello. But listen, I love your idea, and we're going to keep talking about it because you and I will keep talking. And 2022, hey, it's on and popping. 2021 is here. It's on and popping. So I love that, and we're going to do that. But I want to get back to what we really want everybody to know about, because one of the things as I was sitting, Bill, talking about, and you and I talked before the show, was the mindset that African Americans have at this point. And when I say the mindset, I'm going back to the fact that people always tell me that I don't seem like I'm a Charlestonian. So I keep asking, well, how's a Charlestonian supposed to act? Then I started thinking about the fact, Bill, that we have people, and I hate to say this, and I know a lot of people are going to get me for this, but crabs in a barrel. In our communities, we're not cohesive. We haven't built the infrastructures that can take us to the next level. We keep saying we want to get there. And there are some of us that get there, but the majority of us are still stuck. What do you say about that?
I say this, that I think it's Amilcar Cabral or either Franz Fanon that said the most important thing in the hands of the oppressor are the minds of the oppressed. And so as long as, in fact, if we come back to Carter G. Woodson, and so, Carter G. Woodson founded African American History Month. And so, when we think about 100 years ago, we're in 26, we're almost 100 years now from 1926 when it was founded as Negro History Week. And so he said then, that if we didn't have a back door, we would create one because of the fact of the way that we've been conditioned. And so when I want to make that correlation back to the media. And so when we think about the images of us that are presented in the media, and I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and he was talking about some young people that he talks to and how they feel that they're not part of African American history because of the fact that they haven't done anything significant. And so, when the point that I made about King and Malcolm and the thousands of people who supported them, they all made African American history, but their names are not the ones that got highlighted. And so several reasons why I think that we still face with this whole issue of trying to overcome the way that we've been conditioned to think. We've been conditioned to think that we should have white people as our standard. And as long as we think that we have to have white people as our standard, then we're always going to be in trouble because then we will never really value our own accomplishments, which is why the significance of African American history must become so important. Second thing is that I think that we are more we're closer, our bond is closer than I think sometimes we acknowledge. And so now just look at the example of Georgia as, your neighboring state or if we just look at the last election, right? 90% of African American women and 80% of African American men voted to get that fool that was in the White House out. And so clearly we were very united about the fact that there needed to be a change. And we all hope that one day that the masses will be able to rise up in unison. That's rarely true. I mean, as much as I love King, and King was only 26 when the Montgomery bus boycott started. And so from 1955, when the Montgomery bus boycott started to 1968, King was only on the scene for 13 years, right? And in that period of time, his growth was incredible. But one of the things we forget about King is that as he grew, when he started to talk about he wanted economic justice, right? That was one of the things that got King in trouble with the power establishment. When he started to criticize the Vietnam War, right? That was another thing that got him in trouble. When King was in Ghana, King was one of the few African Americans that went to Ghana when Kwame Nkrumah was inaugurated as the president. And so became internationalist thinking, as did Malcolm. And so when we think about ourselves in that global context, then it helps us to expand and understand that, we have opportunity to think about ourselves as a world citizen as opposed to just a citizen of the United States. And so to me, it comes back to that fundamental question about economics. Most of us, because of the fact that we're struggling, then we are hoping somebody's going to give us an opportunity. And if they have a chance, and then how many of us, when we make a little money, leave the neighborhood? And I don't leave the neighborhood, but then don't go back to do anything to help other people who are still there. And so, so I do think that we have to, it's hard to believe in 2021. We still have to build the scaffolds and ladders that people need. We still need mentoring programs. We still need people to come in and do tutorials. We still need to make sure that we are actually providing the kind of services to people that we have. I mean, so when we talked earlier, one of the things that we talked about was the wealth gap. The wealth gap is massive. I mean, we make 70 to 80% of what whites make. So if you look at the median income, if you look at the median income of African Americans, the median incomes of white, in fact, Asians in most parts of the country are the highest earning group. Whites are the second highest earning group. And then us and Latinos or Latinx are about the same, right? But there's usually, we make 70 to 80% of what whites and Asians make. When you look at the wealth gap, they have 12 to 20 times more wealth. And so we only spend 2 cents of every dollar with a Black-owned business.
And I have that, Bill. I didn't want to
Every
stop.
dollar with a Black-owned business. And so I want to make sure that we're clear about the fact that some of this we can change. We can figure out a way to alter our spending habits. We can increase our wealth. We can increase our opportunity for self-employment just by changing some of our spending habits. And so then also connected to education is incarceration. And sadly, New Jersey, despite being a blue state, we've had, Democrats running the state for decades, with the one exception of Krispy Kreme. Y'all call them, Chris Christie. We call them Krispy Kreme. Boy, I had way too many donuts. But we have the most significant disparity of people being incarcerated, people of color being incarcerated anywhere else in the country. And so I want to make sure that we understand the significance of what that is. And so one of my mentors lives in South Carolina, probably not far from you. And so he told me about this report that was done. And I was thinking about South Carolina. I thought about Walter Scott. I thought about, the people at the Emmanuel Church that were killed, Mother Emmanuel. I was like, South Carolina has faced some real serious challenges. And then, similar, and then we hear, and I was amazed. I was absolutely amazed, and to some degree, a little bit uncomfortable with the whole idea, we're going to just forgive you, right? I mean, at some point, we got to have the right to grieve. Like, damn, can we at least grieve the fact that this white terrorist came in our church, killed 9 people, and then got taken to get a hamburger, right? I mean, this is absolutely horrible to think about. And then Walter Scott running away from the cop who gets killed. And then the cop, unfortunately, the brother that, videotaped it, because had he not videotaped it, that cop would have walked, right? I mean, and so we need to really think about the fact that, in all parts of the country, we have been faced. I mean, this 9-year-old little girl that just got pepper sprayed in the face in New York, right? I mean, so everywhere we are under attack. And so when we get under attack, we need to come back, coalesce, and then figure out what are our strategies going to be to fight back. And so when we come together, figure out our plan going forward. How do we collectively move forward? It can't be one person, the me thing. It's got to be we all collectively have to figure out a way to go forward. Then we will see some progress. We've only advanced. Let me just make this one last point. So in 1865 is when the Civil War ended. Right after the Civil War ended is when the Ku Klux Klan and Jim Crow started. And so from 1865 to 1955, right? That was 90 years of Jim Crow. And what was also a factor in starting the Civil Rights Movement was the death and the murder of Emmett Till. So the same way we've seen these murders happen, when Emmett Till's murder happened and his mother, Mamie Till, had an open casket so that the world could see what they did to her son. Right after that, that was August of 55. The Montgomery bus boycott started December 1st, 1955. And then from 1955 to 1965, in 10 years, the people involved in the Civil Rights Movement overturned 100 years of Jim Crow. And so when we really decide to step up and figure out how we want to go forward, we can make some phenomenal changes. But it took a lot of courage. And I went to King and Malcolm were both 39 years old when they were assassinated. King would only been 92 this year had he still been living. But it took, and his house got firebombed, got stabbed in the chest. I mean, you think about the crazy stuff that the brother went through, and Coretta stayed with him the whole time, as did Betty Shabazz with Malcolm. But it took some courageous leadership. When I think about the people in the Black Lives Matter movement now, and that they're facing hoses and dogs and tear gas, the same thing that the People's Rights Movement faced then. So we have young people who are at the forefront, as they always have been at the forefront. February 1st would have been the day that the 4 students sat down at the lunch counter in North Carolina. I mean, so young folks have always been at the forefront. And so the Black Lives Matter movement is at the forefront. I just hope that the elders are ready to support the young folks. And John Lewis, one of our great ancestors, think about how young he was when he got beat down at Bloody Sunday, how young he was when he was involved in SNCC, right? How young he was when he participated on the Freedom Ride, right? I mean, so we've had some phenomenal people who have been at the forefront at a very early age. So I'm hoping that there's some young people who are listening, and I'm hoping there's some elders who are listening, and they're going to pour into these young folks, because we can't think about all of the people who are great heroes without recognizing the people who helped to who contributed in becoming great heroes, right? And so Benjamin Mays was one of Martin Luther King's mentors. Benjamin Mays became the president of Morehouse College, escaped from or got out of slavery, educated himself, became the president of Morehouse. And King came from royalty, being a Baptist preacher, right? Father and grandfather, both Baptist preachers. So the brother was on a path. And how King chose to be one of these prosperity preachers, do you know what we would have missed?
You're exactly right, man. Listen, we need to have. I'm pretty sure folks are listening, because we've got quite a few people who are tuning in, and I know that we're gonna need to do a part two. I just really, everything that you are talking about is so spot on. And this is what we need. We need communication. We need to have these type of forums, these types of forums where people can talk, where people can hear what somebody like you, an expert, is talking about. And then I get some other experts on, and then I have to go on, they saying, amen, Professor Davis, and then I just have to move out the way and just let y'all have at it. But Bill, I want to thank you, because you have brought up so many good points about where we need to go in our country. And I've been saying for the longest time, yes, Malcolm, I love Malcolm, I love Martin. They did a phenomenal job at the time when they were needed. But now it's a different time. And like you say, it's up to us, elders, young people, it's up to us to start making a difference. If you see something that's happening in your community, talk about it, speak about it, get out and do something about it. Just don't sit back and let it happen. It can't do that anymore. We're in 2021. We've been talking about since what? You said 5,000 years, in the 1400s now. Right. We're in 2021. So Bill, this we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I do want to talk about the Black male. How important the Black male is in our country, in our society today, especially for our families. Let's talk about that.
Yes. And in fact, Tammy, and one of the reasons I wrote my book is because I wanted to address the negative stereotypes about Black men in particular. And so there's different studies that show that African-American men are as involved or more involved than fathers from all groups. And so, but the media, coming back to the media and the stereotype of African-American men not being interested or concerned with their children is just something that, so there are far too many stereotypes that we perpetuate sometimes. And I'm not saying that there aren't African-American men who have not stepped up as they should, but there have been men from all groups that haven't stepped up as they should. But somehow we are the ones that get tarnished with this stereotype the most. And so, when I also want to think about the fact that African-American men are the ones that are disproportionately killed by police. African men are the ones that are disproportionately incarcerated. And so one of the challenges that we face, and one of the reasons that when I thought about writing this book, was that I want to work with young brothers because of the fact that I really do think helping some young brothers to realize that their legacy is going to be tied to their children. And which is one of the reasons that I chose the title of my, Baba's Legacy is the website, because of the fact that I want to make sure that people understand that part of their legacy will be tied to their children. And that we need to make sure that our children have a safe space physically and emotionally to grow up. And that at some point, when we are actually connected to our children, that we're going to be able to help them to see possibilities that they don't realize are possible for them. And in some case, children may see possibilities. In some way, my children have exceeded some of the possibilities or some of the things I had anticipated for them. And so I hope that we'll have some opportunity to talk about some mentorship. We have the opportunity to talk, because one of the challenges that we face in terms of education is the ridiculous price that it costs to go to college, and how much student loan debt. We are disproportionately impacted by student loans. So I'm hoping that Biden is going to figure out a way to not just delay the payments, but to actually cancel some of the student loan debt, because we are the ones disproportionately that have high debt because we don't have very much money to give our children in order to go to college. And so Black men have been at the forefront. And one of the things I do want to say that is African-American women graduate college 2 times the rate of African-American men. And so from a family perspective, it actually raises certain kind of questions about, are African-American women going to find a male that's, to use a Christian term, evenly yoked? We're going to find a brother whose educational circumstance, financial circumstance mirrors the woman that he is intending to be with. And African-American women, more than any other group, marry men below their social class. But African-American women have the highest level of divorce rate. I mean, so there's challenges that we face in our family situation. I mean, so we have disproportionate number of brothers incarcerated. We have disproportionate brothers that are not graduating from college or trade school or other kind of, post-secondary educational options. And so we really need to have that conversation about how do we start to create the kind of environment in which we can bring men and women together in a healthy space that's going to allow the relationship to blossom so that then the whole family will benefit. And the sooner that we can have some models and some examples and some, things that we can actually point to say that we see this working. This is an example of something that we should follow. And the better that we can create that, the easier it's going to be for us to be able to move forward. But I do want to make a couple of suggestions. And so as a teacher, I got to give people homework. So there's a couple of things that I hope that people will read.
Got it.
And one is, if you haven't read anything by James Baldwin, please do. And I would definitely suggest that you start with The Fire Next Time. And there's a letter in there that he wrote to his nephew. And one of the things that he says in that letter to his nephew is that we believe the things that white folks say about us. And when we fall victim to that, then it impacts our behavior in a very negative way. Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's one of the baddest young brothers on the planet right now, modeled his book, Between the World and Me, on James Baldwin's writings. If you're not familiar with Ta-Nehisi Coates' last name is Coates, then you should definitely check out his book, Between the World and Me. If you Google him or YouTube, you'll find all kind of interviews. This brother is doing some phenomenal work. We should also read, and it's a thick book, but it's a well-worth book. It's called Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi. This brother documents how from the beginning Europeans put these negative stamps on us, and so we are still fighting off those stereotypes and stigmas that have been attached to us. And while we're in African American History Month, there's a beautiful short speech by King in which he talked about that he's Black and beautiful. He talks about all the negative words that are attached to Black, all the positive things that are attached to white, and then he says, I'm Black and I'm beautiful. It's a great short speech by King. Then we should also check out, there's a sister named Isabel Wilkerson who wrote a book called Caste. And she also wrote a book about the Great Migration called The Warmth of Other Suns. And so we're rich right now with information, but we have to, our mind is our CPU. And the more that we nourish it, the greater we'll be able to understand how we can, break off some of the yokes. The last book I want to recommend is that by W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks, which he wrote in 1903. And he predicted in 1903 that the problem of the 20th century would be the problem of the color line. Sadly, the problem of the 21st century is still the problem of the color line. And Du Bois, as an activist, as a scholar, was a phenomenal example. The last person I want to call is Brother Fred. I could call Frederick Douglass too, because Frederick Douglass embodied the whole idea of us being international, would be Paul Robeson. One of the most profound benefits of attending Rutgers University is learning about Paul Robeson. Most people never heard of him because of the fact that he was whited out of history. But Paul Robeson in the 1930s was the most popular man on the planet because the brother could speak over 20 languages. He could read and write over 25. And so he graduated from Rutgers, went to law school, and because of discrimination in the legal profession, became a world-renowned actor and singer. And he could visit countries and sing the songs of the countries that he visited in their native language. He did Othello in Europe. He lived in London for many, many years. And then because he was accused of being a communist, him, Du Bois, when McCarthy was doing the McCarthy scare, they got incarcerated, got all kind of different kind of things that took place. And so, but the whole idea of us becoming world citizens, Frederick Douglass, Du Bois, there are different people who have embodied that idea. And I think that in 21, one of the things that we should really think about is how do we expand and understand the world in the United States and outside of the United States. One of the points when I raise it is because Libya now has people being put back into slavery because of the fact that, we can't control some of the things happening in our own continent. And so we've had some challenges, but we've had some successes. And so seeing Warnock in the Senate now is a success, right? I mean, and so seeing Stacey Abrams being nominated for Nobel Peace Prize is a success. I mean, so I want us to understand the successes that we have, because we have to have some successes in order to give us the nourishment that we need to keep fighting.
Wow. Whew. I'm like, my brain is like this. I love it. Professor Bill, you did it, man. You did it. You did it.
Okay, you told me to come ready now, so I had to do my prep to come ready.
I was ready for you the last time. You really can't. I mean, I love it. The education that you have given us in such a short time. I mean, so much for us to think about. I mean, you talk about it, and I didn't even get to show it, but you sent me about wealth in New Jersey. You sent me all of the statistics about that. And I mean, all of these things that you brought up, all I can say is amen. That's what everybody says. Amen. Recognize the victorious. Thank Brother Bill. Okay, Miss Deborah, thank you so much.
That's the so I tease her and her husband. She's the secretary of the NAACP. Her husband's the president of the NAACP. And so, Tammy, I can see you got a village around you. I've been fortunate that there's a village around me and my crew. And so all of us are nourished by people in our village. And so, and when we have to go to battle, we need to know there's people who are coming to battle with us. Exactly. And so, I'm grateful for the fact that some members of the village are on. I appreciate, knowing that, we are all we're trying to build something. And so, and we need to know that we can count on some people to help build it. I mean, so when I come back to the great pyramids and the Sphinx and the different things that our ancestors built, it took some imagination and it took some effort. And that's what it takes for us right now. To have some imagination and some effort. And so for anybody that's in New Jersey, and that's the stat that you showed came from the Institute for Social Justice, all of the seats in the New Jersey State Legislature are up for election this year, as is the governor. And so we need to be strategic about figuring out what we want and then how do we get it. And so Stacey Abrams and the folks in Georgia laid out the blueprint, right? They laid out the blueprint. So you identify what it is that you want. You go and find people who have been disaffected, who don't think that politics is for them, and then you give them a reason to vote. And then you follow and monitor what the politicians do. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, then we get them out and get somebody else in. And so it's a very simple blueprint, but we've just got to put our shoulder to the wheel. We had 2 feet of snow out here, Tammy. Wow. And so it took 3 days, just, one shovel at a time to get it out the way. But sometimes we just got to put the work in. That's
exactly. And that's what's going to happen. One step at a time. Like my aunt Cindy would say, you can't eat an elephant. Well, they say you can't eat an elephant all at one time. You just take one chunk.
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. And listen, I'm not trying to eat an elephant, but y'all get it. Because somebody will probably write in about that. But one bite at a time, one chunk at a time. Listen, Bill, I just want to thank you so very much for being on the show. 2022, yes, we're going to do that. We're going to get together. We're going to plan it. And hopefully there'll be some folks that will want to take the journey with us. Maybe, absolutely. And I think we'll do just well with going out there. We'll bring the cameras out there. We'll do this. We will.
Sounds great.
Hey, listen, I'm excited about it. And again, I just want to thank you for being the amazing man that you are and having your amazing village. Thank you all. Thank everybody, the whole family, for watching the show today. My family for watching the show and pushing this out. And when you talk about media, the one thing that my brother just said, he said, I need you all to watch my sister, because we need this kind of media. And so I want to thank you for that. That was confirmation. I want to thank you both for that. My brother, Professor Bill Davis, Dr. Davis. Listen, Bill, you have a great evening, and we're gonna get out of here, but we're gonna be coming back, and you and I are going to call. I got another sister that just coming on saying, you know, how much she loves the great books. And listen, we try to type those books in for you. And
I saw that. I appreciate that.
Hey, listen, we tried to
speaking of books, you know, I got to give a last plug in now. Got to give a last plug in. So hope folks will actually get a copy of Baba and the Crew. Go to the website, www.babaslegacy, BABASLEGACY.com. Contact information is there, emails there. So if you're interested in, you know, having a conversation with me or any of the members of the village, just reach out. We'll be happy to engage. Communication is key. That's one of the things that has helped us to overcome some of the circumstances that we faced.
Yes, it is. And I sure want to thank you. Listen, I'm excited. What's happening next? Go Baba. We got it. Reading is power. So hey, Bill, I can't say anything else. I mean, we got to get out of here. But I love it. I am so grateful to you, my brother, my king. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tammy. Peace and power.
Yes. Okay. Listen, you have a wonderful evening, and I'll give you a call. I'm gonna put you backstage, but hold on. We're going to talk. Okay. All right. Thanks, Bill. Listen, I just want to thank you all. I hope you enjoyed this show. I tell you what, I learned so much from Professor Bill for all that he has done, and he was so well prepared. Of course, that's what it's like being an educator, professor, diasporic educator, and professor from Rutgers. That's what they train you to do. That's what he trained himself to do. So I tell you what, next week we're going to be talking with two amazing men. C. David Moody from Atlanta, Georgia, CEO, author. He's got a lot to talk about, y'all. And then Lester Young, speaker, life coach, author. Let me tell you, these brothers are bad. When I tell you this whole month, y'all have got to watch the show. So I'm going to see you next week, Thursday night, 7 p.m. Subscribe to the channel so you'll know what's going on, please. And like Bill said, we need this media. So I'm hoping that you're going to continue to follow Tammy. So I appreciate it. Listen, I want you all to stay safe. Please remember, wear your mask. Always wear your mask, wash your hands, and listen, 6 feet of distance. We've got to do it, folks, because this is some serious stuff. Until the next time, take care of yourself. Listen, I love you all, and I just want to tell you, bye-bye.